and figuring out what's wrong with it. Okay, and the mechanics have to essentially be highly schooled intellectuals in order to figure out even what's wrong with your car in the first place. And of course, that's costly to the consumer. So basically, they're going to make it harder and harder for anybody to ever drive their car because you just essentially can't afford to drive it. Even if you can afford the gasoline, you can't afford the maintenance. And who is driving the used cars that require maintenance and repairs the most? It's the poor people. So you see how they're doing this, how they are trying to lower our standard of living under the guise of being the good guys and saving the planet. Making it so, well, you've got to think twice about turning on the heater in your house. You've got to think twice about turning on the air conditioner. You've got to think twice about consuming anything that requires energy because you can't afford it. And that's where they want us. And they want to just keep on pushing that envelope, pushing and pushing, and they will, and they are. To this day, that's the state of affairs in America and around the world because America is setting the example for the rest of the world. We are the leader of the free world. People look to America to see where they themselves are headed as a nation. And it's not a good place. And we've all got to understand the implications, the ramifications from tolerating this. And what do I mean by tolerating it? Well, you've got to do something. You've got to speak up against it. You've got to at least say, look, I'm not going to sit here like a spineless jellyfish, like a coward, remain ignorant and remain confused and not speak out, because then you're not even being a decent American. Because if you're a decent American, you'll at least exercise your First Amendment right, okay? Like they say, use it or lose it. And this has happened all over the world where people haven't had a First Amendment right, and they've lost it. There's so many nations, Saudi Arabia, China, where you can't speak your mind without fear of being incarcerated or killed. I mean, basically that's it. If they don't want to pay the expenses of keeping you in jail, well, then they'll just kill you. I mean, China, they're killing some 5,000 people a year, and they've got mobile organ harvesting vehicles going around and, to extract people's organs while they're still nice and fresh. And people are being executed for things that in this country aren't even an infraction. So we've all got to understand the model that these people want to take us, that they want to follow, is that Chinese model, where it's just going to get harder and harder. Our standard of living is going to go down more and more and more until we just accept a third world status. And the good news is that in America, at least, we've got a lot of really good people that don't mind sticking their necks out, putting their lives on the line, and standing up against these people. And all these good and decent reporters and journalists out there, like on InfoWars, and Matt Drudge, of course. Everybody knows Matt Drudge. And so many others. You got your James O'Keefe out there. And it goes on and on and on of people that are really risking their lives. A lot of people think that's hyperbole to say that, but it really is not. That these people are really hated by the establishmentarians, by the Clintonistas and their ilk. And these people are really, they're vicious, and they're just mean people. And they are pseudo-intellectuals. They talk like they're so smart and all this, but really they are tapped into some kind of devilish power, really, of speech. You know, when I listen to Hillary Clinton speak and I think, my God, how can she criticize Donald Trump for this stuff when, and she's campaigning with Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama's got rappers coming to the White House who are singing songs with lyrics about, using date rape drugs on women and taking them home and having their way with them. Literally. I mean, I'm not making anything up. So as much as it might sound like I'm picking on Hillary or I'm picking on Obama or Michelle or something, I'm not. Okay, I'm just pointing out that if they want to, get into Donald Trump's bedroom and say how he's so immoral and how dare he say the things he said, and children had to hear this stuff, and he used the P word in saying that he could, these women would let him do this because he's a star and all this. I mean, look, we all have a carnal nature, okay? And, and most of us don't like to talk about it. I don't like to talk about it. It makes me very uncomfortable. And in retrospect, when I look back at the things I talk about in other videos, I think, I wish I hadn't talked about that stuff because I really came off looking stupid and foolish. But I think it's important for everybody to know, basically, that we do have a carnal nature. And, while it's good and fine to have, a therapist, a counselor, a psychologist maybe that can help you with some things, probably the best is just a good friend you can talk about things. But at the end of the day, remember, everybody is carnally minded to some degree. That's our fallen nature. That's the sinful state that we're in from the original sin. So we all have to deal with this. We all have to admit the fact that we have behavior when we're alone that is unique to any other time when we're with any other person, okay? That's a matter of fact. That there's no people out there that don't do things when they're all by themselves, okay? And that includes the therapists and the pastors and the counselors and the psychologists out there. That this is why we need a relationship with God above all. We need to know that we are understood and we are loved, that this is a forgiving and long-suffering God, and He's merciful, and he pours out His grace on all of us, and it's sufficient for all of us, so we can take great heart in that knowledge. This is, at the end of the day, the most comforted thing. It's not going to come from a friend. It's not going to come from a pastor. It's not going to come from a counselor, a therapist, or anybody else out there that is in a position of trying to help you to deal with things. We all have. It all comes back to us. And when we sling arrows at others, it always comes back to us. Like they say, if you point a finger, there's three fingers. I guess the thumb isn't really pointing back at you, but there's at least three fingers pointing back at you. And this is the way God did it. It's like a fail-safe. These are immutable laws He built into things. So if we're filled with vitriol and animosity toward people, even our enemies, we've got to be very careful about the things we say, because it will come home, like they say, the chickens come home to roost. And it all comes back to us. The ball always ends up in our court, and we're the ones that have to deal with all this stuff, all these improprieties of speech, of thought, because it all starts in our mind, in our heart. The things we harbor and we hold in, okay, end up coming out in an untoward way toward others. And then it just besmirches our own character. And that's something we all should want to avoid, because we all want to have a good reputation. We all want people to think highly of us. And when you read the Bible and you realize that God has given us permission to love our enemies, not only permission, but this is an instruction, that this is the way out. If you really want to succeed and you really want to overcome, then you've got to understand that you've got to embrace humanity as a whole, because God is embracing humanity as a whole. And we don't need to hate human beings. What we need to do is love human beings. We need to reflect the same kind of grace and mercy and long-suffering and forgiveness that God reflects with us. We've all got to give a damn, because we know that our owner, okay, that's who I'm talking about here, God Almighty is our owner, cares about everybody. That those that have been the most wayward, like the story of the prodigal son, that those that have gone out there and experienced the world in the most carnal ways, in the most devious ways, in some might think in the most vile ways, really are loved just as much by God. And when those people, if those people ever turn to Him and they receive that grace, that mercy, that forgiveness, then it's like a debt being forgiven them. And so they have a tendency to love God much more than somebody that has lived a very upright and righteous life. So that's why it's important for us to see his point of view and how it's different from ours. Those that have been forgiven most will love the most. So that's why we are to reflect him and represent him properly and get that message across to people. That this is a fight to the finish, and we're to hold out our hand to the bitter end to the wayward ones out there. So that, albeit people are going to hate you for exposing them and for standing up for the truth, okay, you're going to be hated, and it's not warranted, but there's nothing you can do about people hating you. All you know is that they don't have a basis for hating you. It's not justified. And on those grounds alone, you can shrug it off and you can say, well, God, you know what? I mean, if you want to protect me from these people, if they want to murder me and they're filled with hate toward me, I'm still going to bless them back. I'm not going to wish that lightning strikes them. I'm not going to wish they were dead. I'm not going to wish anything bad. I just want you to tell me what to wish for them. And he'll tell you. And if you read the Bible, you read the New Testament, and you find out his opinion. And that's the one we are to adopt, okay? This is it. Because he said, about what you do for the least of these, you have done for me. So we need to, in our own minds, figure out who is the least of these. We could all look at ourselves and say, well, maybe that's me he's talking about. Maybe I'm the least of these. So we should hope that others treat you and me the way they would treat Jesus, and the things that they do for Jesus and you, okay, is a beautiful thing. And the things they fail to do, okay, is not a beautiful thing. It's a void thing. It's a vapid thing. And it's to no avail, to no profit. So when we care about people, we are loving people. It's not like we got to start going hugging and smiling and all this kind of stuff. That's superficiality. What we want to do is just care deeply about people. And if you care deeply about yourself, if you care deeply about your children, if you care deeply about others, then you will understand. You will be empowered from on high to go out there and to love your fellow man, because this is the highest calling. This is the highest edict. This is the highest commandment, is to love God above all else, because that's right and proper. That's our owner. That's where you got everything from. That's where you got your brain, your hands, your feet, everything, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth. Everything that you enjoy in your life was a gift from God. So of course it makes perfect sense. It's very logical that the first commandment that Jesus gave is to love God above all else with our whole heart, soul, spirit, mind, and body. And he said the second one is comparable. It's very close to the first, and that is simply to love one another. Okay, that's it. To treat others in a manner we want to be treated. This is the golden rule. And if we do these things, we are assured entrance into the kingdom of heaven. But it's not something any of us can fake. It's got to be real and genuine and sincere. And this is where the relationship with God comes in. It's so important that all of us on our own, like Jesus said, you go in your closet. This is not about getting in front of the whole world and making your speech and your sermon on the mount sort of thing. He already did that. There already is a famous one that we're following. There never will be a more famous one than the Most High God and Jesus Christ. So when we get on our knees and we pray earnestly and we say, God, help me to understand. Help me to be the kind of person you want me to be. Help me to find freedom and extricate myself from this worldly mess, this muck and mire that is sinking. It's careening over a cliff to destruction. It has to. The good guy will prevail. Light is stronger than darkness. Right is stronger than wrong. Good is stronger than bad. Truth is stronger than lies, and on in that theme. And that's a matter of fact. So it's only logical to be the kind of person he wants you to be, at least to strive earnestly, devoutly, to be the person he wants us to be, okay? We're never going to lose our individuality. That's impossible. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. If every single snowflake is individual, you can only be certain that every person that was ever born and died and is alive today on the planet is incredibly unique. We're all very unique from one another. So we're not going to lose individuality just by being on the same page as him. By understanding that words have a definition. Right has a definition. Right is always right. Wrong is always wrong. Truth is always truth. Lies are always lies. Good is always good and bad is always bad. Light is always light and darkness is always darkness. Now, all these things I've said can be camouflaged in the other way. That's the whole deceitful nature of the rulers of this world. That's why in the book of Ephesians it talks about having nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose these people and these principalities